Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So now that I'm a full-time bass fishing guide, if you don't know, or if you've watched the channel or paid attention to my social media, I very seldomly fish any more bass fishing tournaments. And I get asked all the time, why? Why don't I fish tournaments anymore? It's a good question. But it basically boils down to the economics of bass fishing. The sport of bass fishing, let's face it, it's a sham. When it comes to economics, it's a pay to play sport, and you spend as much money as you make in the sport. So it's a break even endeavor at best. And to try to support a growing family on tournament winnings is almost impossible. There are very few guys who can do that and sustain it. You might do it 1 year, possibly two, but to try to do that as a career and make all your money based on just bass fishing winnings is almost impossible. And if you've been around the sport of bass fishing for any time, you know that the economics right now for the sport is probably at the lowest level as far as payout for anglers that it's ever been. Not only do the tournaments themselves not pay as much, but sponsorships in general are way down. Trying to make any kind of money at this game as a career and trying to support yourself, let alone trying to send money home to family, is a tedious task at best. That is the number one reason I no longer fish bass fishing tournaments.
Before we go forward, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and you can keep up with all the new content we put out on a weekly basis.
One of the things that was a big eye opener to me when I started to guide full time is you do not realize when you are in the tournament bass fishing scene how small that niche is. We as tournament anglers really give ourselves more credit than that's due, because we really believe we have this major influence to the general public. What I learned when I started guiding every day, and I meet people from all walks of life. 99% of who I take out fishing are real novice anglers or pretty beginner. There's only a small percentage that do it with any kind of consistency to actually call themselves experienced, and let alone pay attention to the sport of bass fishing. All these people that I run into, there are very few that actually know anything about the sport of bass fishing, that know what it's about, who's who, or even know who the greatest anglers of the world are, let alone the bottom 50% of the people that are on TV. Of course, most people know, the Bill Dances, the Roland Martins. They don't know them by name. They'll say, hey, that guy with the Tennessee hat, or that funny character who does this and that. But most people have no clue what's going on in the sport of bass fishing. So we as anglers, we as tournament anglers, have really kind of earned our own bad rap about overestimating our influence to the general public. I know as a guide, I have a much bigger influence now with the people that I take out as far as recommendations of baits and brands than I ever did as a tournament angler, slapping on a company's logo or wrapping my vehicle in those companies' brands and logos. Then now as a guide, when somebody goes out and I say, hey, let's catch them on this bait, and we catch fish on that bait, guess what? That person goes and buys that bait, buys that rod, buys that reel. They want to duplicate everything that happened on their trip to catch fish just as we did on our trip. versus, hey, I fish a tournament and I use this brand. People don't care. Let's face it, people don't care. They don't care about tournament fishing. It's a small little world that we lived in as tournament anglers, and some of us still believe that our influence is great. You're living in a bubble. You living in a non-real world if you really believe that what you do in the tournament world matters to the real world. And it was a big eye opener for me. I didn't I'm guilty just like most of you tournament guys. I thought that I had an influence that I just really did not have. But now that I guide, I see it from the other side. Most Joe Public anglers don't care about tournament fishing. What do they care about? They care about going out there and catching a few fish, enjoying time out on the water with their family, enjoying time out on the water, exploring nature, and just being outside. They could care less who won last week's, Wildcat shootout. They absolutely pay no attention to any of these bigger sport tournaments that are happening. Um, we as tournament anglers think we are important, but the numbers don't lie. Viewership for most of these big name tournament platforms is down. The economics of the sport of bass fishing in general is down. Sure, there's millions and millions of people who fish. The economics of fishing will always be around. There's always money to be made in the sport of fishing. But from a tournament bass fishing level, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the sport of fishing. We're talking about tournament bass fishing. Tournament bass fishing is a niche. If things don't change in the world of tournament bass fishing, it will always be a third-rate sport that Joe Public will dip their toe into and watch a little bit here and there, but it's never going to reach the mainstream because the majority of people cannot attain that level. And even in the sport of bass fishing, there is a tiny fraction of guys who make it. And it's very rarely on tournament winnings alone, if at all. It's almost always sponsorship and networked finances based. And if you think that you can make a living on tournament winnings, you are sorely mistaken and in for a rude awakening. It just does not happen. You have to parlay any success you have into promoting brands and selling product for other brands. So that way you can leverage your own platform to be able to make sales for other companies. And it's something that I've struggled with. I still don't have it figured out exactly. But the honest truth is, you know, now as a bass fishing guide, I look at the sport from a different way and a different side. Like I know now when I make videos, when I push product, it's revolved around my guide business now. Because what I need as a guide is different than what I need as a tournament fisherman. I'm not going to get into the economic breakdown of the cost of the sport versus how much money you make. There's videos out there right now circulating on YouTube and the internet that are all about that. I'm not going to break that down in this video. Suffice it to say, you spend more money or equal money than as you make. And I've had some good years tournament bass fishing. But ultimately, what does that equal? A break-even season. Even if you make $80,000 to $100,000 in winnings that year, guess what? It costs almost that much money to pay to play this sport. Because the travel, the lodging, the gas, the boats, the trucks, the everything that goes into catching these little green fish at the tournament level is a break-even endeavor at best. Now I know I'm going to hurt some of your guys' feelings and you're going to say, no way, I'm the best angler in the world and I make this kind of money and this and that. Well, guess what? Maybe you are. But That's not the majority of you. Majority of you is where we all fall in, where we make enough money out of the sport to basically pay for itself. We have fun doing it. Our egos are stroked because we won that weekend's tournament and we feel like the king of the roost for that week. But ultimately, you're not making any money, not enough to actually call it a career, and therefore it is not a sustainable path to any kind of financial future. And if you want to learn the economics of this sport on a per tournament basis, look into some of the videos that are out there. I'm not going to go into that in this video. But at best, tournament fishing is a break even sport. I would love to hear some of your guys' takes on the sport of bass fishing in general. I know some of you guys are die hard and you want as the depth from the depths of your heart for this to work out and for the sport of bass fishing to be more than it really is. But you have to be honest with yourself, and the sport of bass fishing is this big compared to all the major sports out there in the world. We are a tiny blip, and therefore our influence to the public is very small. Fishing is a worldwide thing. People love the sport of fishing, but tournament bass fishing is this big, and we have to realize that trying to push the sport of bass fishing onto the next generation, albeit it's a fun passion, something fun to pursue, something to keep your kids out of trouble and keep you kind of on the path of the straight and narrow, but that's all it's ever going to be. It is not a career path. Most guys that fish bass fishing tournaments, if they do it as a living, they're independently wealthy. They have some major sponsorship help. Or, let's face it, they got daddy big bucks supporting them. And there's a lot of that out there with this new generation. The fact that a 20-year-old kid's out there sporting a nicer truck and boat than you and I have, that's not anything but daddy money bucks. Let's face it. So, unless you're that special breed and class of person, for most of us, the sport of bass fishing is not a sustainable path. Therefore, we have to find other avenues to subsidize our income. I chose guiding, and now guiding is my full-time income. I no longer fish tournaments because it makes no sense for me to stop guiding for a week to go fish a tournament that I hope to make some money in or potentially get paid for versus the guaranteed income of a week's worth of guiding. Is just not a smart choice. Not when you have small children at home like I have. If in order for me to get back out there into the tournament world, which I would love to do, the economics would have to make sense for me to be able to devote time to it. I cannot at this point in my life devote a week's worth of vacation to go fish a tournament for the hopes of making money to send back to my family. It just cannot happen. Now, if sponsorship was there, if I could, secure the financial backing to get me to be able to get back out there, then absolutely I would put that time back in because I love tournament fishing. It's just not a secure, sustainable career path financial. Now, not in any way am I trying to dissuade you if you really have the passion for tournament fishing. By all means, it's a great hobby, great sport. And if you're one of the few people who can really turn it into a career, by all means, happy for you. But for the majority of anglers who are being fed this notion that you can make a career out of the sport of bass fishing, it's just not prudent to go down that path unless you know what you're getting into. And that's all I'm trying to do is to open your eyes to show you that for the majority of people, it is an unattainable career path. As if you have something else on the side, you're independently wealthy, you got a job, you got a side hustle business, and this is just a side thing that you do, by all means, have at it. It's a great sport. Just know what you're getting into. I wish I knew what I was getting into when I started in the sport of bass fishing. I will always fish, and I love guiding. It keeps me in the world of bass fishing, keeps me catching these fish. It gets me out and being able to network with a lot of fishermen. But the sport of bass fishing is no longer something that is economically viable for me and my family. If things change, I would love to jump both feet back into the game. But until then, and until it's something that is economically sustainable for me to pursue, I'll continue down the path of guiding. I enjoy it, and so be it. For right now, this is the path that I have chosen to pursue to continue in the sport of bass fishing. Just no more tournaments for me for now. Until next time, tight lines.